At just 6 years old, Shirley Temple wasn't just a child. She was the child. The smile that lit up a dying nation. The curly-haired miracle who danced her way through war, recession, and hopelessness. To millions, she was America's answer to despair. But what no one saw behind those dimples was a girl being sold. She wasn't given a childhood. She was handed scripts. She wasn't kissed goodnight. She was painted and powdered before sunrise, and the worst part, she didn't know it was wrong. Not yet. Hollywood adored her. The White House admired her. But behind studio doors, men in suits ogled her. Script meetings turned into subtle touches. Casting sessions into humiliation. Shirley once recalled being cornered by a producer as he unzipped himself in front of her at age 12. She kicked him in the shin and ran. But that wasn't the only time, just the one she spoke of. Because, for all her fame, Shirley Temple belonged to everyone but herself. She was the highest-paid actor in America before she hit puberty. And when puberty finally arrived, when her body began to grow, when her face began to change, the magic, as they called it, disappeared. The world that had once crowned her sweetheart now turned its back. Her films flopped. Studio contracts vanished. The world no longer needed a dancing doll, especially not one that bled, grew breasts, and spoke her own mind. And Shirley? She didn't spiral, not publicly. She didn't overdose. She didn't crash. But she disappeared. And when she came back, years later, it wasn't in glittering gowns or tap shoes. It was in government buildings, at war summits, as a U.S. ambassador, a policy negotiator, a sharp-minded woman who understood global power more than most of her male colleagues. She rebuilt herself from the ruins of fame, but she never forgot what they took. This is not the story of a cute child who danced with Bojangles. This is the story of what it costs to be a star before you have teeth, to be a commodity before you even know what privacy means. This is the story of a girl who made America feel better while she was slowly being broken. Shirley Jane Temple was born on April 23, 1928, in Santa Monica, California, just miles from the beating heart of Hollywood. She was the third child of George and Gertrude Temple, a family with modest roots but outsized ambitions, especially her mother. Gertrude Temple wasn't just a housewife. She was, in every sense of the word, a stage mother, the kind who saw stardom not as a dream, but as a strategy. And Shirley? Shirley was the strategy. By the age of 3, Shirley was enrolled in Meglin's dance school, a grooming ground for child performers. But she wasn't sent there for fun or friends. Her curls were counted, her steps critiqued, her face studied for how it would look under studio lights. At home, Shirley was taught obedience, not tenderness. Her bedtime stories were tap routines. Her lullabies were lines of dialogue. And when casting directors came knocking, her mother taught her how to smile until it hurt, and not to stop smiling even if it did. She was trained to charm, to please, to never question. At age 3, Shirley landed her first film contract with Educational Pictures, a studio specializing in comedy shorts. The roles were small, the pay minimal, but her mother saw potential. She curled Shirley's hair into 56 perfect ringlets, a look that would later become her trademark. And a trap. Audiences adored it. Studios demanded it. And Shirley? She was never allowed to change it, even as her real hair straightened, even as she grew older. The curls stayed. Because America didn't want Shirley. They wanted Little Miss Fix-It. The perfectly coiffed savior in a sailor dress who could make grown men cry and Wall Street hope. By age 6, Shirley was a box office phenomenon. Her breakout role in Stand Up and Cheer, 1934, made her an instant sensation. Fox Film Corporation, later 20th Century Fox, saw her as the cure to the Depression. She filmed constantly, sometimes 4 to 5 movies a year, each production demanding more energy, more lines, more emotional labor, all from a child who had barely learned to write her own name. She didn't go to school. Not really. Studios hired private tutors, under contract to never interfere with filming schedules. If Shirley had a math test but a scene to shoot, the scene won. Even her playtime was scripted. At photo shoots, she posed with dolls and puppies she didn't own. At fan events, she shook hands until her wrists ached, and all the while her mother stood by, watching, not to protect her, but to make sure she performed. Shirley once said, "I stopped being a kid the day I learned not to cry on camera." At 7, she became the youngest person to ever receive an Oscar, an honorary one, handed to her by adults who didn't see a little girl, but a golden goose. But what most people didn't know was that behind her trailer door, Shirley was coached relentlessly. How to flirt with the camera, how to win over male directors, how to laugh at jokes she didn't understand. Sometimes those jokes weren't innocent. Years later, Shirley revealed that she was groped, kissed, and ogled by adult men in the industry long before she turned 13. At the time, she didn't even know what was happening, only that it felt wrong. But her mother never pulled her out, because pulling her out meant pulling out of the spotlight, and the spotlight was feeding them all. Shirley never had slumber parties, never climbed trees, never scraped her knees. She had contracts, and underneath the rhinestones and rehearsals was a child who didn't know how to just be. A journalist once asked Shirley, "What's your happiest memory from childhood?" She paused for a long time, then whispered, "There wasn't much time for memories. I was always being someone else. And the girl the world loved? She wasn't Shirley Temple. She was a role, a carefully manufactured persona, a shield that kept the real Shirley buried somewhere underneath those curls." When Shirley Temple was 7, she didn't just star in movies. She was the movies. In 1935, her face appeared on everything from lunch boxes to toothpaste. She had her own line of dolls, sheet music, coloring books, breakfast cereals. People didn't buy tickets to see films. They bought tickets to see her. She was, quite literally, the most profitable star in America. During the darkest days of the Great Depression, as banks collapsed and bread lines stretched down city blocks, Shirley Temple danced on screen with childlike grace and uncanny polish. Her voice lifted spirits. Her dimples gave hope. Franklin D. Roosevelt even said, "As long as our country has Shirley Temple, we will be all right." But no one asked if Shirley was all right. She filmed endlessly. Wake-up calls at 5 a.m., makeup by 6, choreography until her feet bled. Dialogue memorized like prayers. A tap-dancing miracle who never had time to nap, much less play. And if she made a mistake, if she missed a line, stumbled in a scene, she'd be scolded, sometimes in front of the whole crew. There were no second chances, not for a child carrying the weight of a nation's escapism on her tiny shoulders. Behind the camera, she was obedient, controlled, a professional in patent leather shoes. But even as America fell deeper in love with the idea of Shirley Temple, the real Shirley began to fade. She couldn't tell where the character ended and the person began. She once admitted, "When the director called cut, I didn't know what to do. I was still pretending." She worked with grown men, danced with adult actors, shared scenes that required her to flirt, wink, and speak lines written by middle-aged writers pretending to be children. In Curly Top, she serenades a man who's supposed to adopt her, but the dialogue sounds more like a wife doting on her husband. In Baby Take a Bow, she performs for adult criminals in a sequence that would be deeply uncomfortable today. She was sexualized, romanticized, and commercialized, all before she reached her 10th birthday. And as she grew older, it got worse. During wardrobe fittings, she was told her legs were too fat. She was weighed weekly. Studio executives demanded her baby teeth be removed early to avoid gaps on screen. She filmed with dentures at age 8, but she smiled anyway, because smiling was survival. Her mother coached her daily, "Don't pout, don't blink too much, hit your mark, make them love you." And America did. Her films were so successful that 20th Century Fox avoided bankruptcy solely because of her. She saved an empire, and yet she earned a fraction of what she brought in. Her parents were given control of her earnings. By the time she turned 21, much of it was gone. She was never greedy, but she was never asked. As she reached adolescence, things changed. She began growing. Her voice deepened. Her face lost some of its cherubic glow. Studio executives started whispering, "She's not cute anymore." Her roles dwindled. Scripts dried up. One executive reportedly said, "No one wants to see Shirley Temple kiss a boy." And Shirley? She felt confused. She had been built for this stage, and now it was vanishing beneath her. She began to ask questions. Why wasn't she allowed to rest? Why were adult men staring at her body? Why were lines between play and performance so blurred? But every time she asked, she was reminded, "You're lucky to be here." So she nodded and danced and smiled, but something inside her began to fracture, and in those cracks the truth began to leak through. By age 10, Shirley Temple had become the most famous child in the world. She was more than an actress. She was a symbol, a myth, a savior of an industry on the brink. From 1935 to 1938, she was Hollywood's top box office draw, 4 years in a row. No adult star came close. Presidents invited her. Diplomats toasted her. Fans mobbed theaters just to see her dimples flicker on screen. But behind the curtain, cracks were forming, and no one dared to look too closely. The people around Shirley, the studio executives, her parents, her handlers, didn't want a girl. They wanted a product. Her childhood had been packaged, marketed, and monetized. There was no room for growth, no space for awkwardness, no tolerance for transition. So when puberty crept in, subtly at first, then suddenly, Hollywood recoiled. Her voice changed. Her body matured. The tight sailor dresses that once drew applause now felt uncomfortable, even inappropriate. She was still forced to wear them. In one interview, Shirley recalled a chilling detail. "They asked me to flatten my chest, to bind it, so I wouldn't look older." The studios needed Shirley Temple to stay frozen in time, but time doesn't ask permission. As she entered her early teens, film after film failed. Audiences didn't want to see their precious Shirley become human. A girl with emotions, hormones, independence. They wanted the dancing doll. Her final years at Fox were humiliating. The scripts became weaker, the stories more absurd. Studio executives lost interest. And when her contract expired at age 12, they didn't renew it. The girl who had once saved the studio was now seen as disposable. Her parents tried to salvage her career, moving her to MGM, the same studio that had manufactured Judy Garland. But Shirley wasn't welcomed with open arms. MGM already had its golden girl, and Shirley's presence felt like competition. She was given smaller roles, background scenes. Her name, once plastered on marquees, was now in smaller font below the title. And behind the scenes, things were far worse. In her memoir, Shirley revealed that on her very first day at MGM, she was greeted by an executive who exposed himself to her in his office. She was just 12. She ran out, shocked, shaken, told her mother, but nothing happened. No lawsuits, no firings, no protection. Because Shirley Temple, despite her fame, was still just a child in a world run by powerful men. She continued to work, but the magic had gone. She was growing up, and the industry didn't want her to. In one scene from her teen years, a director told her to cry. Real tears. The pressure was immense. She couldn't force them. He screamed at her, again and again. When she finally cried, it wasn't acting. It was exhaustion. She began to feel the weight of never having been asked what she wanted. Every smile had been scripted. Every dress chosen by someone else. Every moment of affection. A transaction. At age 15, she starred in The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer with Cary Grant, one of her last memorable performances. Critics praised her, but the film's success didn't revive her star power. The world had moved on. She tried dating, but even that was difficult. Boys were intimidated. Studios didn't like the image of Shirley Temple with lipstick and heels. She wasn't allowed to be cute anymore, but she wasn't allowed to be a woman either. She was, in every sense, trapped between two versions of herself, and neither one belonged to her. By the time she turned 17, Shirley Temple, once America's sweetheart, was quietly retired from Hollywood. No farewell, no fanfare, just silence. And for the first time in her life, she heard it. When the camera stopped, Shirley Temple didn't know where to go. She had been on film sets since she was 3. Fame had been her reality, spotlight her oxygen. But now, at age 17, the lights were off, and no one was watching. And for the first time, she realized she didn't know who she was. Her career had ended without warning, without applause, without grace. No comeback tour, no honorary speeches. One day, she was America's sweetheart. The next, just another teenager trying to figure out how to exist. But she wasn't like other girls her age. She hadn't gone to school properly, had never been on a date without a publicist, didn't know how to balance a checkbook, boil pasta, or sleeping past 6 a.m. Her entire identity had been built on being someone else. Now, there was no one left to play. At 17, she married actor John Agar. He was older, handsome, and represented a kind of normalcy she craved. But the marriage, built on shallow promises and misplaced hope, was doomed from the beginning. Agar drank a lot. He was jealous of Shirley's fame, even though she had walked away from it. He struggled to find work. She struggled to feel like a wife and not a ghost. They had a daughter, but even motherhood couldn't fix what was broken. By age 21, Shirley Temple was a divorced single mother, emotionally numb, deeply isolated, and barely out of her teenage years. Paparazzi still followed her, but not to celebrate, to mock. Child star fizzles out.